The oil dripped off the oil pan in slow drips, leaving dark stains on the concrete garage floor. I wiped my hands on an old rag and checked the crankcase bolts again. My 98-year-old Ford Ranger had served me well for 27 years, and I wasn't about to give in to the vagaries of time. The engine ran smoothly, without any sound. The transmission shifted smoothly, just as it should. The sun was streaming through the garage's only window with slanting rays, highlighting the dust in the air. Outside the window, I could see the roofs of the neighbors' houses, as modest and time-worn as my own. Norfolk wasn't luxurious, but it was a quiet place to live, free of the hustle and bustle of the city. The neighborhood had been developed in the 60s, when young families were looking for affordable housing away from the center. Now, most of the original owners had either died or moved into nursing homes, and their places had been taken by young couples like Rosalind and Blaze. I was just checking the coolant level when I heard the familiar sound of car doors. A clap, then another. That meant the two of them had arrived. Voices in the driveway, female and male, were approaching the garage. I took my time stepping out to meet them. Unscheduled visits from my daughter usually meant she needed something. "Daddy, are you in here?" Rosalind peered into the garage, squinting against the semi-darkness. Behind her loomed Blaze, my son-in-law, a tall guy with a perpetually disgruntled expression. He was 35, but he carried himself like the whole world owed him a favor. He worked as a manager for a construction firm, but spent most of his time complaining about his bosses and the small paycheck. "Here," I answered, without lifting my head from the radiator. "What's wrong?" Rosalind entered the garage, looking around my workstation as if seeing it for the first time. My daughter was 38, but sometimes she acted like a cranky little girl. Her blonde hair was in a ponytail, and she wore light makeup on her face, as if she'd dressed up for a visit to her father. Since my mother's death 3 years ago, she'd been visiting me more often, but those visits were always accompanied by advice on how I should live my life. "We wanted to talk to you," she said, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. "About your car." That was it. That's what I thought. Blaze coughed behind her back and took a step forward. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt that emphasized his lean build. There was no tan. It was obvious he spent most of his time in the office. His hands were white, manicured, without a single callus. "I always wondered how my daughter could have married such a pampered type." "Irwin," he began in the tone one usually uses with children, "we're worried about you. You're not young anymore, and driving is getting dangerous." I straightened up and looked at him. Blaze avoided a direct look, studying the tools on the workbench. A coward, as always. In the 7 years I'd known him, I'd never once seen him look me in the eye during a serious conversation. "Dangerous to whom?" I asked. "In 47 years of driving, I've never had a single serious accident." "Dad, it's not about statistics," Rosalind interjected. "It's just that as you get older, your reactions slow down and your eyesight deteriorates. It's natural." She spoke softly, but there were notes in her voice that I remembered well from her childhood. It was how she'd asked for a new toy or permission to go to her girlfriend's house. Only now she was in her 40s and she was asking for my car. "My reactions are fine," I said, closing the hood. "And my eyesight too. Just passed my medical exam to renew my license." Blaze snorted. "Those boards are a formality. The important thing is to pay." I didn't like his tone. In the years I'd known him, I'd never been able to sympathize with my daughter's husband. He was always looking for someone to blame for his failures, complaining about his circumstances, but never making much effort to change the situation. "Want to test my reaction?" I suggested. "We could go for a ride." "Dad, that's not the point." Rosalind stepped closer. "We're offering you a reasonable solution. You don't need a car every day. You can use the bus or call a cab." A reasonable solution. That's an interesting way of putting it. Reasonable for whom? Meanwhile, the car will sit idle in the garage? Blaze stepped from foot to foot. He was clearly nervous, and it gave away his intentions better than any words could. "Not really. You see, we're in a tricky transportation situation right now. My car's been sent in for overhaul, and without wheels, I can't function properly." That's it. So it's not about my age. It's about their needs. I'd suspected that from the beginning of the conversation. Blaze drove an old Honda that did require constant repairs, but he was in no hurry to buy a new car preferring to complain about financial difficulties. "And how long will these repairs last?" I asked. "2 months, maybe 3, Blaze answered without looking at me. "There's a long wait for parts." "And then the car will come back to me?" Rosalind and Blaze exchanged a look. There was something in that look that I didn't like. Some kind of understanding between them that I was excluded from. "Dad, let's be honest," my daughter said. "At your age, it's best not to take risks. You need a car for someone who works, who supports a family." Uh-huh. Now it all fell into place. "I've been supporting a family for 40 years, I reminded her, "and I bought the car with my own money." "That was a long time ago." Blaze tried to feign an understanding smile. "Times have changed. We take care of you now." Care. It's an interesting word, especially when uttered by a man who, in 7 years, had never once inquired about my well-being for no reason at all. I wiped my hands on the rag again and hung it on the hook. My garage was organized simply, but conveniently. Every tool in its place and everything I needed at my fingertips. The workbench I made myself when I first bought the house. The shelving was also homemade. This is where I've spent most of my free time since I retired 5 years ago. "Look," I said, "I understand you have transportation problems, but that's no reason to take my car away." "No one's taking anything away," Rosalind objected. "We just want you to be safe." "And to keep the car from being idle," Blaze added. "Fair enough, at least. At least something." I looked at my pickup. The silver paint was faded in places, but the body was holding up well. The interior was a little worn, but the engine ran like clockwork. It drove me to and from work for 17 years until I retired. Then my wife and I went shopping, to the doctor, sometimes to the sea. After her death 3 years ago, the pickup truck remained the only connection to my former life. "What if I don't agree?" I asked. Rosalind sighed theatrically, like she did as a child when she didn't get what she wanted. "Daddy, don't make this difficult. It's not like we're your enemies." "Then why are you talking like enemies?" Blaze was clearly losing patience. He took another step forward, and I could smell his cologne, a pungent, intrusive odor, apparently determined to make an impression before an important conversation. "Look, Irwin, let's be manly. You're 73 years old. At that age, it's time to think about safety. And we need a car for work, for a normal life." "So my life isn't normal." "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" Rosalind put her hand on her husband's shoulder, stopping him. She always did that when she felt Blaze might say something unnecessary. "That's enough," she said. "Dad, just think about it, okay? We don't demand an immediate answer." But I could see in her eyes that they were demanding just that, and saw that they had already decided everything among themselves before they came here. This conversation was a mere formality, an attempt to get my agreement to a decision already made. "You know what, Rosalind," I said, "I'll really think about it. Just give me some time." "How much time?" Blaze asked immediately. "Hurry up. Can't even act like he's willing to wait." "A week," I replied. "Is that enough time?" They looked at each other again. "Of course, Dad," Rosalind said. "We realize this is a big decision." They stood in the garage some more, clearly hoping I'd change my mind right away. But I remained silent, pretending to study some papers on the workbench. Finally, they realized the conversation was over. "Then we'll go," the daughter said. "Think carefully, Daddy. We're really worried." I nodded without raising my head. I heard their footsteps in the driveway, the slamming of doors, the sound of the engine starting. Blaze's Honda was running rough, intermittent. It was going to break down for good. When the sound of the car died down, I lifted my head and looked at my pickup, a reliable, time-tested vehicle. We'd been down a lot of roads together, and I wasn't about to part with it just because my in-laws needed free transportation. It had been 4 days since their first visit, and I had almost forgotten about the conversation when I heard the familiar sound of Blaze's Honda in the driveway, again around 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. This time they weren't careful with polite inquiries about my health. The garage door opened without a knock, and Rosalind entered first, her son-in-law looming behind her with a determined look on his face. "Daddy, we talked at home and decided," the daughter began without preamble. "It's really time for you to give up driving. That's our final opinion." I was just changing the oil in the differential, and their appearance took me by surprise. My hands were up to my elbows in grease, and I had old newspapers spread out on the floor to keep the concrete from getting dirty. I had to quickly wipe my palms on rags and get out from under the car. Final judgment on my life? I asked, rising from my knees. Interesting. Blaze took a step forward. Today he was wearing dark jeans and a plaid shirt, clearly trying to look more serious and masculine. But the effect was the opposite. He looked like a schoolboy dressed up as an adult. "Irwin, look at the facts," he said, pulling a folded sheet of paper out of his pocket. "I did a study. Drivers over 70 get into accidents 3 times as often as younger drivers." "Where did you get that statistic?" I inquired. "On the internet. It's official data from the insurance companies." Rosalind nodded, supporting her husband. "Dad, we don't want you to get hurt, or for anyone else to get hurt because of you." I looked at their faces. Sincere concern or a well-played scene? It was hard to tell. I'd learned over the years to recognize falsity, but with my own daughter, it was harder to do so. "What exactly do you suggest?" I asked. "Very simple," Blaze enthused, seeing that I was ready to discuss the details. "You leave the car on loan to us, you take public transportation." "Public transportation," I repeated. "In Norfolk." "Buses run regularly," Rosalind interjected. "To downtown, to the hospital, to the mall. Where else do you need to go?" "Good question. Where do I need to go?" "To the auto shop where I've worked for 40 years and where I still occasionally help old friends with repairs. To the doctor's office across town. To the construction store for parts and tools. To my wife's grave in the cemetery outside of town. But is it any of their business?" "I need to go where I need to go," I replied. "And when I need to go." "Dad, don't be stubborn." Rosalind tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Think practically. The car sits idle in the garage most of the time, and Blaze needs it for work every day." "For work?" he interjected. "What happened to the buses? Are they just for retirees?" Blaze blushed. "That's different. I have to drive around the facilities meeting with clients. That's not possible on a bus." "Is it possible for me to take the bus?" "You're not working." That was it. He finally said what he was thinking. "I don't work, so I'm not important. So my needs can be ignored." "I'm not officially working," I clarified. "But that doesn't mean I sit at home and watch TV." "What do you do?" Rosalind asked with undisguised curiosity. She really didn't know. 3 years after my mother's death, and she had no idea how I spent my time. That spoke volumes. "Helping out at McGregor's car service," I replied. "He can't do it alone, and good locksmiths are hard to find." "Are you getting paid?" Blaze asked immediately. "None of your business." "Dad, you're retired," Rosalind tried to feign understanding. "You don't need to work anymore. I need to feel useful." "You can feel useful without a car, like doing some gardening." I looked out the window at my small plot of land. The lawn was mowed, the flower bed was weeded, the apple tree was bearing fruit. What else was there to do out there? "Or read books," my daughter continued. "Watch movies, get some rest." Rest. Another interesting word. Apparently in their minds, retirement meant waiting to die in a comfortable position. Blaze, meanwhile, was walking around the garage, inspecting my pickup with the look of an expert. "Nice car," he said. "It looks well cared for. I'll keep it in the same condition." "You know about cars?" and I asked. "In general terms." "And in specifics?" He mooled. "Well, there are car repair shops. Sure, there are car services. And there are also people who think of a car as just a means of transportation rather than a living organism that requires understanding and care." "Blaze, have you ever changed the oil with your own hands?" I inquired. "Why? There are specialists for that." "Have you ever checked the brake pads?" "Look, Irwin, what difference does it make? The important thing is that the car doesn't sit idle." Idle? He thought my life was idle. Rosalind sensed the conversation was taking a wrong turn. "Dad, we don't mean to offend you," she said. "Just be reasonable. You really don't need a car every day." "How do you know what I need?" "Well, it's not like you hardly ever go anywhere." "Almost nowhere?" "To the store once a week, sometimes to the doctor." "What about the car service? What about the cemetery? And old friends?" She blinked. Apparently these details of my life were escaping her attention. "Daddy, you can call a cab." "Every day?" Do you know how much that would cost? Not every day, only when you really need one. And who's going to decide when I really need one? You? Blaze was again useful with his arguments. Irwin, let's do the math. Car maintenance is gas, insurance, inspection, repairs. That adds up to a decent amount of money a year. And cabs are only for when you need them. Have you done the math? In general terms, again, roughly, did this man know anything about in generalities? Did you take freedom into account? What freedom? The freedom to go wherever I want, whenever I want, without having to explain to anyone why or wherefore. Rosalind sighed. Dad, at your age, that freedom can get expensive. At my age, they said those words as if I were 90, not 73, like I was a decrepit old man who could barely move his legs. Look, I said, I understand your situation. I understand that you need a car, but that doesn't mean I have to lose mine. Not forfeit, Blaze objected. Just share it. Share with who? With you. What's wrong with that? Good question. What's wrong with that? That he sees me as a burden? That he only sees me as an obstacle to his convenience? Or that my own daughter supports him in this? You know what, Blaze, I said. Let me ask you a question. If your father came to you tomorrow and told you that you were too young and inexperienced to drive, and demanded that you give the keys to him, what would you say? That's a silly example. Why stupid? Because young drivers are not as dangerous as old drivers. Statistics show the opposite. What statistics? The same one you showed me. Young drivers under 25 get into accidents more often than anyone else. Blaze faltered. Apparently, he'd been reading his sources inattentively. But that's different, he tried to object. Different how? Rosalind stepped in again to save the situation. Dad, stop playing with words. We're offering a reasonable compromise. What compromise? I give up my car and in return I get the right to ride the bus? You get peace of mind and security. Whose peace of mind? Mine or yours? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer because we all knew the right answer. Blaze, meanwhile, continued to look over the pickup, clearly envisioning how he would drive it. Nice car, he repeated. Reliable. That's why I bought it, I said. So it would last me a long time. It will. Not just for you. Not just me. So at best, I'd be a junior partner in using my own car. What if I want to drive at the same time as you? I asked. We'll make an arrangement. We'll make a schedule. A schedule for using my own car. This was getting to be too much. Thursday morning, I decided to walk to the store. Not because I was afraid to drive. I just wanted to walk and think. I'd been talking to Rosalind and Blaze for the last few days, and I needed to think about it without their pressure and persuasion. The morning was cool for mid-September. The leaves on the trees were just beginning to turn yellow, but I could already feel fall in the air. I put on a light jacket and followed the familiar route to the supermarket on Granby Street. It was a leisurely walk of about 20 minutes, just the right amount of time for reflection. The neighborhood was slowly waking up. Neighbors were taking their dogs out, someone was watering their lawns, and the sound of cars on the main road could be heard. The ordinary life of ordinary people who don't think about the fact that someone might consider them too old to live independently. At the store, I bought the essentials: bread, milk, some vegetables. I met Mrs. Palmer, a widow from the next street. She lived alone like me, but no one asked her to give up her car. True, she was only 68, not 73. Apparently, those 5 years made a crucial difference in the eyes of the younger generation. On the way back, I thought about what I would say to Rosalind and Blaze the next time I saw them. They clearly weren't going to back down, and I needed to find a convincing argument. Though, to be honest, I doubted I could change their minds. They'd already made their decision, and now they were just looking for a way to make me agree with it. When I turned onto my street, I immediately noticed something was wrong. The driveway to my house looked empty. Too empty. I quickened my step, and after a few yards, I realized what was wrong. My pickup truck was gone. I stopped in front of the garage and looked at the empty spot where my car had been parked an hour ago. The garage door was closed, but there was no lock on it. The door on the side of the house appeared to be open as well. Inside the garage, there was a quadruple folded piece of paper on the workbench. I unfolded it and recognized Rosalind's handwriting. Dad, we took the car. We know you'll be upset, but it's for the best. We left the keys in the ignition. Blaze needs the car right away. He has an important client meeting. Don't worry, we'll take care of the car. Rosalind. I reread the note several times, not believing my eyes. They'd just taken my car. Without permission, without warning. Like thieves. My first thought was to call the police. Report it stolen. But then I realized that was impossible. Rosalind is my daughter and she has a spare key to the house. She hadn't technically committed a crime, just taken advantage of a family relationship. I sat down on a stool at the workbench and tried to calm down. The anger was bottling up inside, but I needed to think soberly. What to do? How to act in such a situation? About 10 minutes later, the phone rang in the house. I didn't hurry to answer it. I knew who was calling, but the receiver kept ringing, and finally I picked it up. Daddy? Rosalind's voice sounded strained. Sure, are you home? At home, I answered briefly. Did you find the note? Found it. A pause. Apparently, she was expecting a more violent reaction. Dad, I know you're mad, but understand, we really need the car. Blaze has an important presentation today. And that's why you stole my car. We didn't steal anything. This is family. Family. Interesting logic. So a family relationship gives you the right to take someone else's property without permission. Where's the car? I asked. Blaze has it at work. Dad, don't be dramatic. We'll return it tonight. Bring it back? Well, not exactly. I mean, it'll be parked in our yard, but you can use it when you need to. When you decide I need it. Dad, be reasonable. You said yourself you'd think about our offer. I said I'd think about it. I didn't say I'd accept it. But time's running out and no decision's been made. And we need the car now. The logic is amazing. If I don't agree fast enough, they have the right to make the decision for me. Give the car back, I said. Dad, don't be stubborn. Try living without the car for at least a week. You'll see it's no big deal. Give it back, the car. She sighed. Okay, I'll talk to Blaze, but not tonight. He's got some really important stuff to do. And the phone disconnected. I was left standing in the hallway with the phone in my hand, trying to make sense of what was happening. My own daughter had stolen my car and thought it was normal. What's more, she was putting her husband's business above my rights and feelings. Back in the garage, I took another close look at the spot where the car had been parked. Tire tracks were visible on the concrete floor. They were clearly in a hurry and not particularly careful when driving out. Good thing they hadn't scratched the gate. I tried to imagine how it had happened. Did Rosalind come alone or with Blaze? Probably alone. He was at work. So she came in her car, opened the garage, started my pickup, and drove off. Then she came back for her car, or the other way around. She brought Blaze in first to pick up the pickup and drove him to work in her car. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that they'd crossed a line. What started out as a family conversation about safety had turned into outright coercion. I stepped out of the garage and walked around the yard. A small lot, a manicured lawn, an apple tree I'd planted 20 years ago. The place where I'd spent most of my life, where Rosalind was born and raised, where my wife had died, and now my own daughter thought she had the right to run my life. The neighbor's cat Murphy sat on the fence and watched me with typical feline indifference. This fat ginger cat appeared in my yard regularly, hunting mice in the barn. I occasionally fed him leftover fish, and he had gotten used to not being afraid of me. What do you say, Murphy? I asked. Do your kittens think you're too old to live on your own, too? The cat meowed and jumped off the fence, heading for the water bowl by the porch. At least someone in this world was still treating me normally. I walked into the house and sat in my favorite chair by the window. From here, I could see the driveway, empty and unaccustomedly wide without my pickup truck. Outside the window, a mail van drove by, stopped at a neighbor's house, drove on. Normal life went on, and I was seething inside with indignation. The phone rang again. This time it was Blaze calling. Irvine, hi! His voice sounded strangely cheerful. How are you doing? Great, I replied, especially after you stole my car. We didn't steal anything. Rosalind explained the situation to you. She did, very convincing. Look, I understand you're upset, but understand us too. I really need the car for work. Clients aren't going to wait for me to take the bus. Do I have to take the bus? You're not working. There's that argument again. Apparently, in their minds, a person who didn't work was automatically an inferior creature whose needs could be ignored. Blaze, return the car, I said. Tomorrow. I need it today. And tomorrow? Tomorrow too. And the day after tomorrow? Irwin, let's not play these games. We had a deal. We didn't agree on anything. You just stole my car. We took it temporarily for a good cause. Whose cause? Common cause, family business. Family business. So now my car was part of some family enterprise that I'd forgotten to be notified of. Look, Blaze, I said, if you want a car so badly, buy your own. With what? Money doesn't grow on trees. Did my car grow on a tree? That's different. You're not using it to its full potential anymore. How do you know how I use it? Well, you're retired. There's that logic again. Retired equals unneeded. I hung up without waiting for him to finish his speech. I was tired of these conversations where they tried to convince me that black is white. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I walked around the house, tried to read, but my thoughts kept returning to the morning incident. Anger was slowly being replaced by cold determination. If they decided to play by those rules, I could change my tactics. In the evening, Rosalind called again. Daddy, how are you feeling? She asked in a concerned tone. Fine, I replied, especially after today's family values lesson. Daddy, don't be mad. We really want what's best for us. What's best for whom? For everyone. For you, too. I wonder what you think is best for me. She was quiet for a moment, apparently choosing her words. Dad, try to understand. We don't want anything to happen to you, and a car at your age is a risk. My age is my business. Not just yours, we're worried about you. Worried. Worried enough to steal a car in broad daylight. Rosalind, I said, if you're really worried about me, then give the car back. Dad, return the car and we'll talk, like civilized people. Okay, she said after a pause. Blaze will bring it back tomorrow morning. What time? By 9 in the morning. I'll be waiting. That was the end of the conversation. I didn't have much faith in their promises, but I decided to give them one more chance. One last chance. I didn't sleep well during the night, constantly waking up and listening to the sounds outside my window. Every time a car drove by on the street, I got up and looked out the window to see if my pickup was coming home. But the driveway remained empty until morning. At 8 in the morning, I was already sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee and waiting. 9 o'clock passed, then 10:30. The car was gone. At 10 in the morning, I called Rosalind. Where's the car? I asked without preamble. Dad, I'm sorry. There was a change of plans. Blaze had to make an emergency business trip. What kind of business? Work stuff. Very important. I realized they were just playing with me. Promise, deny, promise again. Classic exhaustion tactics. Okay, I said. Got it. Dad, don't be mad. Tonight, Blaze will be sure to. I hung up without finishing listening. It was clear that no one was going to give anything back. They were just counting on me to get tired of resisting and accept the situation. They were wrong. After talking to Rosalind, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about the situation. They were counting on me being helplessly indignant and then resigning myself to the situation. Typical young people's mistake. They thought they knew everything about me but had no idea who they were dealing with. 40 years in the car business had left me with connections that Rosalind and Blaze didn't even know they had. And one of those connections could be very useful in this situation. Clyde Russell had owned a tow truck service for 15 years. We'd met when he was just starting out, and he often stopped by our car service for technical advice. A short, stocky man with a gray beard, he looked soft and good-natured, but he was tough as nails in business. Over the years, Clyde had learned to master the legal intricacies of the automobile business. I found his number in an old notebook and dialed in the afternoon when the workday was in full swing. Russell speaking. His voice sounded businesslike, with a slight hoarseness from years of smoking. Clyde, this is Irwin Corbett. Remember me? Irwin, of course I remember you. How's it going, old boy? Long time no see. All right, listen, I need your help. Can you spare a few minutes? There's always time for you. What's the problem? I told him the pickup story, not going into family details, but explaining the nature of the situation. Clyde listened attentively, occasionally interjecting details. I see, he said when I was done. It's an unpleasant situation. How's the paperwork on the car? That's the thing, I replied. Remember when I bought a pickup truck when I was still working at McGregor's? Back then, there was a tax-saving scheme where the car was registered to a service station and the employee was listed as a user of company vehicles. Clyde whistled. Yep, and technically the car is still owned by the car service? Exactly. McGregor offered to reissue the paperwork to me several times after I retired, but I put it off. It seemed like there was no rush. And now that might play into your hands. Clyde's voice took on an interested note. If I understand correctly, your relatives aren't aware of the legal intricacies? They have no idea. To them, the car is just mine, that's all. Great. How does McGregor feel about you? Good. We've been friends for 40 years. Sometimes I help him out at the auto shop when he needs experienced hands. Clyde was quiet for a moment, apparently mulling over the possibilities. Listen, Irwin, I've got an idea, but first I need to check something out. Give me a day or two. I'll study the paperwork and get back to you. And what are you going to do? I won't reveal my cards yet, but if my assumptions are correct, your relatives will learn a good lesson. Nothing illegal? Everything is strictly within the law. What's more, the law will be on our side. We agreed that he would call me back tomorrow night. After talking to Clyde, my mood brightened considerably. It was good to know that not all bridges were burned and I had allies. The rest of the day passed quietly. I did small chores, read the newspaper, watched the news. Toward evening, Rosalind called again, but I didn't pick up the phone. I did not want to listen to another explanation and promises. The next morning around 9 o'clock, the phone rang. It was Clyde calling, and he sounded pleased. Irwin, things are even better than I thought. Your car is indeed listed as McGregor's Auto Service, and you're listed as a responsible user of company vehicles. And what does that mean? It means that anyone who uses that car without the owner's permission is technically committing theft, and the owner has the right to demand the immediate return of the vehicle. Will McGregor agree to that? Already agreed. I had a word with him yesterday. He's outraged by your relative's behavior too, by the way. Said he's always willing to help out an old friend. Jim McGregor was of the same breed of man as I was, an honest hard worker who had spent his life making a living with his hands. He had 3 sons, and he would never let them treat their father like that. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. Official seizure of the vehicle for violating the terms of use of the company car. I come with the paperwork and take the car to the impound lot. Then your relatives can go to McGregor for clarification. Is that legal? Absolutely. I have all the necessary licenses to do this kind of work, and the paperwork is correct. I like the plan. Simple, effective, and perfectly legal. When can you do it? I asked. Even today, we just need to find out where the car is now. I thought, Blaze would probably drive the pickup home after work and then drive it to the office tomorrow morning. So the best thing to do in the morning would be to surprise him. Tomorrow morning, I said. About 8 o'clock in the morning, the car will be parked at 112 Bishop Street. That's my daughter's address. Great. I'll be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. What am I supposed to do? Nothing. Stay home and wait for the calls. I don't think they'll be long in coming. We went over the details again, and Clyde promised to arrange everything. After talking to him, I felt a sense of satisfaction. At last, the situation was beginning to turn in my direction. That evening, as expected, Blaze drove my pickup to Rosalind's house. I could see it from the window. He parked the car in the driveway and went into the house. Apparently, they had finally decided that the pickup was now their property. I slept much better at night than I had the previous days. It was good to know that tomorrow morning my overconfident relatives would get an unexpected surprise. At 7 in the morning, I was already up, drinking coffee and waiting for developments. My mind was spinning with thoughts of how Rosalind and Blaze would react to what was happening. Most likely the first reaction would be shock, then outrage, then attempts to blame me for everything. At exactly 8 in the morning, my phone rang. I took my time answering it, letting it ring a few times. Hello, I said in the most innocent tone possible. Daddy! Rosalind's voice was on the verge of hysteria. What's going on? Some people took your car. What people? Tow truck drivers. They said the car was stolen. That's strange, I replied. And where was it parked? In our yard. Blaze was just about to drive to work. Maybe it's a mistake. What kind of mistake? They showed the paperwork. They said the car belongs to some car service. I paused, giving her time to process what I'd heard. A car service? I interjected. Interesting. Daddy, do you know anything about that? What would I know? I'm just sitting at home like you wanted me to. Rosalind was clearly trying to pull herself together. Dad, we need to sort this out. Come over to our place. I can't. It's not like I have a car. Then we'll come to you. In what? You don't have a car either. A pause. Apparently the irony of the situation was only now dawning on her. We'll call a cab, she said through gritted teeth. Okay, I'll be waiting. Half an hour later, a cab pulled up to my house. Rosalind and Blaze jumped out of it, both disheveled and clearly agitated. Blaze was in his house clothes, apparently not having had time to change for work. They burst into the house without knocking, and Blaze immediately turned on me accusingly. You did this, he shouted. You set it up on purpose. Set what up? I asked, settling back in my chair. The evacuation. You knew the car was registered to an auto body shop? Of course I did. Didn't you know? Rosalind sat down on the couch, trying to calm her trembling hands. Daddy, why didn't you tell us? Did you ask? You thought you could just take my car and no one would mind. Blaze was thrashing around the room like a hunted animal. Where's the car now? I have no idea, I answered honestly. It probably in the impound lot. How do you get it back? You have to contact the owner. You mean McGregor's Auto Service. Would he agree to that? I don't know, you have to ask. Rosalind looked at me suspiciously. Dad, can you make a deal with this McGregor guy? I can try. Then make a deal. What for? I thought you said I was too old to drive. Blaze stopped and stared at me. Are you blackmailing us? I'm just recalling your own words. Rosalind stood up from the couch. Dad, stop playing around. We need the car. Don't I need it? You don't for work? There was that argument again. Apparently, they really did think work was the only justification for owning a car. Look, I said, if you want your car back, there's an easy way. What's that? Ask nicely. And give me the keys back. They looked at each other. Pride and practicality struggled in their eyes. Blaze was the first one who couldn't stand the tension. He pulled out his cell phone and began to dial nervously, stepping back to the window. Hello, police? Yes, I want to report a stolen car, he spoke, trying to put an official tone to his voice. We had a car taken from our yard this morning by some crooks claiming to be tow truck drivers. I listened to his conversation with interest. Rosalind sat on the edge of the couch, nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. I could see from her face that she realized the futility of her husband's scheme, but she didn't dare to stop him. What do you mean you need the car papers? Blaze's voice was getting higher. The car belongs to my father-in-law, and the papers, he has the papers. He turned to me and gestured for the papers. I shook my head. What do you mean if the car isn't yours, they won't take a statement? Blaze continued into the phone. But it's family. We use the car with the owner's permission. The cop on the other end of the line was apparently explaining the basics of property law to him. Blaze listened, growing increasingly red in the face. I see, he finally said, and disconnected the phone. What did they say? Rosalind asked. They said to contact the owner of the car. If the owner doesn't report the theft, the police don't get involved. Rosalind looked at me hopefully. Dad, you're going to report the theft, aren't you? What theft? I wondered. The car was taken by the rightful owner. But you were using it. Used it. Until you stole it. Blaze slipped the phone into his pocket and sat down next to his wife. His self-confidence had evaporated somewhere, and now he looked confused and scared. Erwin, let's have a serious talk, he said. I have to be at work in an hour. I have an important presentation. Can't you take the bus? Buses don't run very often, I'll be late. Taxi? Expensive. And then I'd have to drive to the sites. Rent a car? Blaze wrinkled his nose. That's even more expensive. Rosalind sighed and put her hand on her husband's shoulder. Dad, she said in a pleading tone, help us. We're family. When you stole my car, did you remember family too? We didn't steal it. You took it without permission. That's called stealing. Blaze jumped up again and started pacing the room. His nervousness was so obvious that even Rosalind began to squint at him. Look, Irwin, he said, stopping in front of me. You realize if I'm late for the presentation, I could lose a client, and that's a lot of money. And if I can't make it to the doctor's office, that's money too. Only of a different kind. What doctor? You're healthy. How do you know? Blaze faltered. Really, how could he know about the state of my health? In the 7 years I'd known him, he'd never once inquired about it. Rosalind tried to smooth things over. Dad, if you need to see a doctor, we'll drive you. In what? You don't have a car. Well, when we get yours back, are you going to return it? Of course. When? She glanced over at her husband. When ours is repaired. And when it's repaired? In a month or two. Or 3, Blaze added. I leaned back in my chair. So you want me to help you get my car back, which you'll then repossess indefinitely? Well, basically, yes. The logic is astounding. They'd stolen my car, gotten in trouble for it, and now they were asking me to help them get out of it so they could steal the car again. Blaze's phone rang. He looked at the screen and crinkled his nose. It's from work, he said to his wife. Answer it. Blaze took the call and retreated to the corner of the room. Hey, Dave. Yeah, I know I'm supposed to be at the office by now. No, I'm having car trouble. What kind of problems? Well, that's a long explanation. Yes, I realize the presentation is important. Rosalind listened to the conversation with increasing concern. It was clear from Blaze's voice that things were not going well. Look, Dave, give me another hour. I'll figure it out. What do you mean the client can't wait? What if we reschedule for tomorrow? I see. Okay, I got it. He disconnected the phone and turned around to us with a grim face. What did they say? Rosalind asked. They said that if I don't show up at the office in half an hour, Thompson will do the presentation. What does that mean? It means I'll lose a client and possibly a job. Rosalind turned pale. What do you mean a job? I've had problems with lateness before. The bosses warned me. Interesting. So Blaze was having problems not only with the car, but also with work discipline. That explained his nervousness and desperation to get my pickup. Dad, Rosalind turned to me with a pleading look in her eyes. Help me, please. If Blaze loses his job, then what? Then we'll be out of money. I don't work. Yeah, I remember. Rosalind quit her secretarial job 2 years ago, citing stress. Since then, she'd been keeping herself busy around the house and finding herself in various hobbies. Why aren't you working? I asked. Well, until I found the right place. In 2 years, she blushed. It's not as easy as it looks. Blaze, meanwhile, pulled out his phone again. I'll call a cab service. Maybe I'll make it in time. He dialed a number and waited for an answer. Hello? Yeah, I need a car right now. What do you mean the nearest available one won't be available until an hour from now? And for a surcharge? How much extra? $50? It's a robbery. He disconnected and threw the phone on the couch in frustration. That's it, it's over. I'm going to be late, lose my client and my job, all because of your games. He addressed the last words to me. Rosalind tugged on his sleeve. Blaze, don't yell at Dad. Who's there to yell at? He's the one who set this whole thing up. I didn't set anything up, I replied calmly. I just used the same methods you did. What methods? Took what I needed without asking the owner. But it's our car. I mean, it's yours. No, it isn't. It was mine until you stole it. And now it belongs to McGregor's Auto Service. Rosalind got up from the couch and walked over to me. Dad, explain honestly. Can you make a deal with this McGregor guy? I can. Then make a deal. Why? Why? To get the car back. And then you'll take it back again? She hesitated. Well, we agreed. We didn't agree on anything. You stole the car. Blaze jumped up again. Stop going on and on about stealing. We're relatives. Relatives have no right to steal from each other. We weren't stealing. We were borrowing. Without the owner's permission, it's called stealing. Rosalind sat back down on the couch and covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, what do we do now? Blaze looked at his watch. That's it, time's up. You don't have to call McGregor, it's too late. He collapsed into the chair opposite and stared at the ceiling. You know what, Irwin? You win. We lose the car, I lose my job, and you triumph. I'm not triumphant, I'm just defending my property. Your property? Rosalind raised her head. But the car belongs to the car service. Technically, yes. Factually, it belongs to me. I bought it. I paid for it. I've used it for 17 years. Then why didn't you turn it over to yourself? Didn't have to. Until now. Blaze stood up and headed for the exit. That's it, I'm off. On the bus. Maybe I'll catch at least part of the presentation. What bus? Rosalind asked. The next one's not for another half hour. On foot then. At least something. He'd already reached the door when I called out to him. Blaze. He turned around. What? And if I make a deal with McGregor, you guarantee you won't take my car again without permission? He froze on the threshold. You? Can you really make a deal? I can try. Rosalind jumped up from the couch. Dad, will you help? On one condition. What's that? No more talk about me being too old to drive. I get to keep the car. Blaze and Rosalind glanced over. What about our transportation problems? He asked. Those are your problems. You decide for yourself. But you hardly ever use the car, do you? How do you know? Well, you stay at home. I stay home when I want to stay home. And when I want to drive, I drive my car. Rosalind came over to me and took my hand. Daddy, you can't be so rigid. We're a family. When you stole the car, were you thinking about family too? We explained that we needed the car for work. Don't I need it? You don't need it for work. There's that argument again. Apparently, they really didn't realize that life wasn't limited to work. Blaze looked at his watch again and made his decision. All right, Irvine. We agree to your terms. You keep the car. Just help us get it back. Now? Now! I got up out of my chair and headed for the phone. Okay, but be warned. If you try anything like that again, I won't help you anymore. Understood, Rosalind said. We've learned our lesson. Did we? Time would tell. I dialed Clyde's number. Clyde, it's Irwin. Can you return the car? My in-laws promised not to make any more trouble. Already? They gave up fast. They're having problems at work. I see. Okay, the car can be picked up from the tow lot anytime. You don't have to pay anything. It wasn't a real tow. Thanks, Clyde. I owe you one. I don't owe you anything. It was interesting to be involved in a case like this. I hung up the phone and turned to Rosalind and Blaze. The car can be picked up. I'll give you the address of the tow yard. And the paperwork? Blaze asked. What kind of papers? Well, to get the car back. I have the papers. I'll ride with you. Rosalind nodded. Good. Then let's call a cab and go. 20 minutes later, we were on our way to the tow lot. Blaze sat next to the driver and glanced nervously at his watch. Rosalind stared out the window silently, and I thought about how the lesson they'd learned today might be a lesson for all of us. A week of relative calm passed after the car was returned. I went about my business, helped McGregor at the auto shop, visited my wife's grave. Ordinary life, which I enjoyed especially acutely after recent events. Rosalind and Blaze hadn't called, and I hoped the lesson had gone well for them. But on Saturday morning, my calm ended. I was just changing the spark plugs in the garage when I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up. This time they came in Blaze's old Honda, which was misfiring and spewing blue smoke out the tailpipe. Rosalind was the first to get out of the car. She was dressed in a business suit, as if she were going to an important meeting, but her face was tired and tense. She was followed by Blaze in crumpled jeans and a t-shirt. They didn't speak to each other, and there was some uncomfortable tension between them. Dad, Rosalind said as she walked into the garage, we need to talk. About what? I asked, not lifting my head from the engine. About the paperwork on your car. I straightened up and looked at them. Blaze was standing just behind his wife and avoided meeting my gaze. He had the expression on his face of a man who'd done something badly wrong. What's with the paperwork? We were at McGregor's, Rosalind said. Nana Shemimon. Wanted to see if there was any way to resolve the paperwork issue. Interesting. So they haven't settled down and are still making plans for my car. And what did he say? Blaze finally spoke, but his voice sounded unsure. He said he could reissue the car to you, but that would require some paperwork and certificates. What kind of documents? A certificate from the IRS that the car service has no debt on the car. A certificate from the insurance company. Inspection papers for the last 3 years. And a bunch of other paperwork. Rosalind stepped closer. Dad, we want to help you get all of these documents together. Why? So that the car is officially yours. So there won't be any more misunderstandings like last week. Misunderstandings. That's an interesting euphemism for theft. What's this got to do with you? I asked. Blaze stepped from foot to foot. Well, we can help with the paperwork. Go to the offices, wait in lines. Out of pure altruism? Rosalind blushed. Dad, why do you always think the worst? We really want to help. And what in return? They exchanged a look. There was so much eloquence in that look that words became superfluous. Well, Rosalind began cautiously, since we're going to spend time doing the paperwork, maybe you'll let us use the car once in a while? That was it. That's what I thought. Sometimes. How often? When you don't need it. And who gets to decide when I need it and when I don't? Well, we can make a deal, make a schedule. There's that unfortunate schedule again. Apparently, they really thought my life should be subject to their schedule. I sat down on a stool and looked at them carefully. Look, I don't think you quite understand the situation. The car is mine, papers or no papers. I use it when I want to, and I'm not going to make any schedules. Blaze sighed. Irwin, be reasonable. We have a real transportation problem. You have a car. I nodded toward their Honda. That wreck, it could break down at any moment. Then fix it. That takes money. And where am I supposed to get the money to fix your problems? Rosalind tried to take control of the situation. Dad, it's not like we're asking you for money. We just want to borrow your car sometimes. Without my permission like last time? No, with permission. By arrangement. What if I don't want to make an arrangement? She didn't answer. Blaze was silent too, but irritation was showing on his face. Look, Irvin, he finally said, I realize you're resentful of us for last time. But let's face it, you're 73 years old. You need a car a couple times a week at most. I need it every day for work. How do you know how many times a week I need a car? Well, you're retired. So? Well, retired people usually stay home. Usually and you are different things. Rosalind sensed the conversation was taking a wrong turn. Dad, Blaze didn't mean to offend you. He's just trying to explain our situation. Your situation, I understand. But it's your problem, not mine. But we're family. Family? I'm so sick of that word, especially the way they use it. When you stole my car, were you thinking about family too? We didn't steal it. How many times do you have to say that? And what's it called when you take someone else's property without permission? Blaze couldn't take it anymore. That's enough already. We realized what we did was wrong. I apologized if that's okay with you. I didn't. You said what you did was wrong. That's not the same as apologizing. Fine, I apologize. Happy? I looked at him. A man who apologizes through force, in his heart, almost with a shout. What's the point of an apology like that? You know what, Blaze, I said. Your apology sounds like a threat. What kind of threat? And that if I don't forgive, I'll be a bad person. Rosalind sat down on the toolbox. Dad, why are you picking on words? We're here to make peace. You came here to demand my car. It's not demanding, it's asking. It's a small difference. Blaze started pacing around the garage, clearly nervous. Look, Irvine, let's be specific. What do you want? For you to leave me alone. That's it? That's it. And if we have a problem, it's up to you. But you can help. I can, but I don't want to. Rosalind jumped up from the crate. Daddy, why have you gotten so stiff? Tough? Well, yeah. You used to always help us. You never used to steal my car. Stealing again? What else do you call it? Blaze stopped in front of me. Okay, let's say we stole. What's next? Are you going to spend the rest of your life reminding us of it? Is there a statute of limitations on family betrayal? What kind of betrayal? What do you call a situation where a daughter and son-in-law cheat their father out of his car? Rosalind turned pale. We didn't betray you. We just decided you knew what was best for me. Well, in a way, yes. And who gave you that right? We're worried about you. That's a strange way of expressing concern. Blaze sat down on the workbench. All right, Irvine, tell me straight. What do we need to do to make you trust us? Nothing. You mean? Meaning you don't have to do anything. Just leave me alone. But we're related. So? Well, relatives are supposed to help each other. When have I ever asked for your help? He hesitated. Well, you haven't, but then what are we talking about? Rosalind came over to me and tried to take my hand. Daddy, you can't be so stubborn. It's called being principled. Principles are good, but life is more complicated. Whose life? Our life. Human life. My life was pretty simple until you interfered with it. Blaze rose from the workbench. No compromise then. What kind of compromise do you want? Well, we help you with the paperwork, and you let us use the car once in a while. What if I don't need the papers? What do you mean you don't need them? It's like this. I've lived 73 years without the right car papers, and I'll continue to do so. But there could be problems. What kind of trouble? With whom? Well, with the police, with the IRS. I've got a power of attorney from McGregor to use the company vehicle. That's good enough. What if he dies? Then we'll deal with it as it comes. Rosalind and Blaze glanced over. Disappointment was written all over their faces. So, you refuse, which the daughter asked. Refusing what? From our offer. What did you offer me? Help with the paperwork. Thank you, I don't need it. But why? Because I know the value of your help. Blaze blushed. What do you mean? That any help you give me turns into trouble for me. That's not fair. Fair enough. Take the car story, for instance. Rosalind sighed. Dad, don't you understand our situation? I do. And you don't want to help? I don't. But why? Because you created your own situation. What do you mean we did? And who made Blaze late for work? It was the car. No, it's the lack of organization. Blaze jumped up. What, you think I'm unorganized? Do you consider yourself organized? Of course. Then why are you having trouble at work? It's a temporary problem. Temporary? How long? Well, 6 months, maybe a year. You can solve any transportation problem in a year. With what? With what money? How am I supposed to have money for your problems? Rosalind realized she had reached an impasse. Daddy, what if we pay you to use the car? How much? Well, I don't know. Whatever you say. $1,000 a month? What? That's robbery. That's the market price of a rental car. But we're a family. Exactly. It's a family discount. 1,000 instead of 1,500. Blaze clutched his head. Where are we going to get $1,000 a month? That's your problem. But you realize that's impossible. Then use your car. It's broken. Fix it. It's expensive. Cheaper than paying me. Rosalind sat back down on the toolbox. You could tell by the look on her face that she was close to tears. Daddy, I don't understand what's happened to you. You used to be kind. I used to not be lied to by my relatives. We didn't cheat you. What do you call a situation where they say one thing and do another? She didn't answer. Blaze was silent too, looking at his shoes. Finally, he looked up. Irvine, what if we apologize publicly? In front of witnesses? For what? For taking the car without permission. And then what? Well, maybe then you'll reconsider. No. Why not? Because apologizing doesn't change anything. What do you mean it doesn't change anything? What does it change? The fact that you stole the car? Or the fact that you're willing to do it again? We didn't steal it. Okay, you took it without permission. What does apologizing change? Blaze thought for a moment. Well, it shows we're remorseful. Remorseful for what? For taking the car? Or for getting caught? He didn't answer, and that was the answer. Rosalind got up from the crate. Dad, we get it. You don't trust us anymore. Rightly understood. And you'll never trust us again? We'll see about that. In the meantime, solve your own problems. They headed for the garage exit. At the door, Blaze turned around. You know what, Irvine? You've gotten really selfish. Maybe. And that doesn't bother you? No. Why not? Because selfish people are at least honest about their intentions. They walked out without saying a word. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a car starting up and the sound of doors slamming shut. The Honda didn't start right away, the engine running rough, but finally they drove away. I was alone in the garage and I felt strangely relieved. Maybe Blaze was right, and maybe I really had become selfish. But after what had happened, I didn't care. The next 10 days passed in silence. I minded my own business, going to McGregor's auto shop where I helped him repair a couple of old cars. The work was soothing, reminding me of a time when life had been simpler and clearer. My hands remembered every move, every tool was in its usual place, and no one questioned my right to do what I did best. McGregor, upon learning the details of the pickup story, only shook his head. "Times are changing, Irwin," he said as he tightened the bolts on the gearbox of the old Chevy. "The young used to respect their elders. Now they think we're a burden." "Not all of them," I replied, handing him the right-size socket wrench. "A lot of them do. My middle son thinks I spend too much time in the auto shop, too. Says it's time for a well-deserved vacation. What do you think?" "I think a well-deserved vacation is when a man decides to take a vacation, not when he's forced to do so." We worked in pleasant silence, each thinking of his own. Outside the window, a fine rain was drizzling, typical of October in Norfolk. In such weather, it was especially good to be in the warm garage, where the smell of machine oil and metal wafted through the air. Around 3 in the afternoon, my cell phone rang. It was Rosalind calling, but I didn't answer it. Then it rang again, and again. On the 5th ring, I did pick up the phone. "Daddy, finally!" My daughter's voice sounded excited. "Why didn't you answer?" "Been working." "What's wrong?" "We're in trouble. Big problems." "What kind of trouble?" "Blaze's car finally broke down. He was driving to work this morning, and the engine stalled right at the intersection." I wasn't surprised. I could tell from the sound of the exhaust that the Honda was living out its last days. "So now what?" "Now he's late for work every day. Rides the buses, but they don't run regularly. The bosses have already given him a warning." "I see. Dad, we need your help." "Help with what exactly?" "Blaze has been trying to work out transportation through his contacts. One promised to lease a car for half price. Another promised to help with a loan to buy one. But it didn't work out." "Why?" "The first one changed his mind at the last moment, said he needed the car for himself, and the bank turned down the loan." "For what reason?" Rosalind was quiet for a moment. "Blaze had defaults on previous loans." "Interesting. So their financial problems are more serious than I thought." "And what do you want me to do?" "Help, please. Blaze could lose his job." "How exactly am I supposed to help?" "Well, maybe you'll vouch for him at the bank, or borrow money to buy a car." I grinned. "So now they not only want my car, they want my money too." "Rosalind, how much money do you need?" "Not very much. 15,000 for a used car." "Not very much. For them, maybe, but it was a third of my savings." "What if I say no?" "Dad, you can't say no. We're a family." There's that word again. A family that only remembers the ties of kinship when it needs something. "Rosalind, have you tried working?" "I told you, I can't find the right place." "And the wrong one." "What do you mean?" "Any job. Clerk, waitress, cleaning lady." "Dad, what are you doing? I'm an educated woman." "An educated woman who can't find a job for 2 years and lives on her husband's salary." "Educated women also work as salesmen if they need to support their families." "But it's humiliating." "Isn't asking your father for money humiliating?" She didn't answer. "Dad, come to our house. We need to have a serious talk." "About what?" "About our situation." "I'm not coming." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to." "Then we'll come to you." "By what?" "By bus." "Come." I disconnected the phone and went back to work. McGregor looked at me curiously, but said nothing. He was the kind of man who didn't pry into other people's family affairs uninvited. An hour or so later, I was home. The rain had picked up, and I decided not to wash the car as I had planned. Instead, I went into the house, made some strong tea, and settled down in a chair by the window to wait for my guests. They showed up around 5 in the evening, soaked and disgruntled. The buses did run irregularly, especially in rainy weather. Rosalind was wearing a light jacket, which didn't save her from the rain, and Blaze was wearing a sports windbreaker, also soaking wet. "Come on in and dry off," I said, handing them towels. "Thanks," Blaze mumbled, blotting his hair. Rosalind took off her jacket and hung it in the hallway. Her face was tired and she had dark circles under her eyes. It was obvious that the last few days had not been easy for her. "How was your trip?" I asked. "Terrible," she replied. 40 minutes waiting for a bus, then another 20 minutes driving. A car would have gotten there in 10 minutes. The hint was transparent, but I ignored it. Would you like some tea? Yes, thank you. We walked through to the living room. I poured the tea into cups, and they sat down on the couch. Blaze looked particularly depressed, kept glancing at his watch and rubbing his strap nervously. Well, tell me about your problems, I said. Rosalind looked at her husband, but he remained silent, staring into his cup. Dad, the situation is worse than I said on the phone, she began. Blaze has already gotten an official warning at work. If he's late one more time, he'll be fired. And when might he be late next time? Tomorrow morning, if he can't find transportation. And cabs? Expensive. We've already spent all our spare money on cabs this week. Blaze finally spoke. Erwin, I realize you and I aren't on the best of terms, but this is my job we're talking about. It was about your job a month ago when you stole my car. Not stole it, took it, without authorization. It's the same thing, Rosalind intervened. Dad, stop reminiscing about the past. Let's think about the future. What future? About how to solve our problems. They're your problems, not mine. But you can help. I can, but I don't have to. Blaze set the cup on the table and looked me in the eye. Tell me straight, what do I have to do to get you to help? Good question. I'd been thinking about it for a long time, and I had an answer ready. A public apology. What kind of public apology? In front of witnesses, in front of people who know us all. Apologize for what? For stealing the car, for cheating, for disrespect. Blaze blushed. It's humiliating. Yeah, so what? Well, how can you demand such things from your relatives? Easy, just like you can steal from relatives. Rosalind tried to compromise. Daddy, what if we apologize only to you? Privately? No. Why? Because privately you've already apologized. It didn't work. But a public apology is too much. And stealing a car isn't too much? We told you. We needed the car. I need a car too, but I don't steal other people's. Blaze stood up and started pacing the room. Okay, let's say we agree to a public apology. What else? The return of the keys to my house. What keys? The spare keys you have. Rosalind turned pale. But Dad, those keys are for emergencies. What kind of emergencies? Well, if something happens to you, if anything happens to me, call an ambulance. They know how to pick locks. But we're relatives. We should have keys. Why should we? Well, it's natural. For whom is it natural? For children to have keys to their parents' house. Children who don't steal from their parents can have keys. Kids who steal can't. Blaze stopped in front of my chair. Erwin, you're putting us in an impossible position. What impossible? Well, a public apology, returning the keys, that's a complete breakdown of the relationship. No, it's rebuilding trust. How does it rebuild trust? It shows you're willing to take responsibility for your actions. Rosalind cried. Daddy, don't you realize how hard this is for us? I do. Then why are you so cruel? I'm not cruel. I'm consistent. Consistent in what? Protecting my boundaries. What boundaries? My property is my right. My decision is my right. My trust is my right. Blaze sat back down on the couch. So either we agree to your terms or no help. Exactly. And if we don't agree, you'll have to deal with the problems on your own. But we can't do that. That's your problem. Rosalind wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. Daddy, are there any other options? No. None at all? Not at all. But this is a family. Family is when people respect each other. We respect you. That's a weird way of showing respect. Blaze stood up. That's it, I get it. There will be no help. There will be, on my terms. Those are conditions we can't fulfill. Your business, Rosalind came up to me. Dad, think again. Isn't there another way? No, not at all. Not at all. But you don't want Blaze to be out of a job, do you? His job is not my responsibility. What if he can't find another job? He will if he wants to. And if he doesn't, that's his choice. Blaze headed for the exit. Let's go, Rosalind. There's nothing for us to do here. She hesitated. Dad, maybe you'll change your mind after all. No, never. The terms still stand. Is that final? Yes. She sighed and followed her husband. At the door, Blaze turned around. You know something, Irvine? You've become a completely different person. Yeah, more honest. Honest with who? With myself. They left. I stared at them through the window at the bus stop. It kept raining, and they stood under the awning waiting for the bus. Rosalind kept looking back at my house, apparently hoping I would get out and call them back. But I didn't. I felt sorry for them, but not sorry enough to change my principles. They had made their choice a month ago when they stole my machine. Now it was time to take responsibility for that choice. The bus came a half hour later. They got on it and left, and I was left alone with my thoughts and a cup of cold tea. A week passed without calls or visits. I did the usual things, helped McGregor at the car service, went shopping, visited the doctor for a routine checkup. Life was falling into a familiar rut, and I had almost forgotten about the family drama when Clyde called on Wednesday morning. "Irwin, I've got news," he said in a cheerful voice. "McGregor has decided to reissue your car to you. Says he's tired of the paperwork with the IRS over a company vehicle." "What does that mean?" "It means in a couple weeks you'll be the full owner of your pickup. No car service, no power of attorney. Just your car and your papers." The news was welcome. Yuri. No longer would anyone be able to use legal intricacies to manipulate my property. What needs to be done? Nothing much. McGregor has already filed the paperwork with the IRS. You'll just need to sign a couple of papers and pay a state fee. How much? Pennies, $300 for everything? We agreed to meet the following week at the auto shop to do the paperwork. After talking to Clyde, my mood lifted. It was good to know that all legal matters would soon be finalized. Thursday around lunchtime, the house phone rang. It was Rosalind calling, and she sounded distraught. "Daddy, the thing we were afraid would happen has happened," she said without preamble. "What happened?" "Blaze got fired." I wasn't surprised. After our last conversation, this outcome seemed inevitable. For what? For being systematically late. He was late for work 3 days in a row because of buses, and the bosses lost patience. I see. Dad, is that all you have to say? What else am I supposed to say? Well, maybe express sympathy or offer to help. I sympathize, but I won't offer help. Why not? Because the conditions remain the same. Rosalind was silent for a moment. Daddy, do you know what happens now? I don't know. We'll be left destitute. You have unemployment benefits. It'll last us a month, 2 months tops. And then Blaze will find a new job. And if he doesn't, he will if he wants to. Dad, you say that like it's a simple matter, isn't it? It's hard to get a job these days. Finding a good job is hard. Finding any job is not very. What do you mean? That Blaze can go to work as a loader, a security guard, a delivery boy? There's plenty of work if you're not picky. But he's got an education. Education's not going anywhere. In the meantime, you can work with your hands. It's humiliating. Isn't it humiliating to live on other people's money? She didn't answer. Daddy, we're seriously thinking about your terms, she said at last. Think. But a public apology, that's really very hard. And stealing the car was easy? It's not like we stole it. Okay, taken without permission. Was that easy? No, it was hard. Here, a public apology would be hard too. Fair enough. And the keys to the house? What keys? Well, it's a last resort. Necessary. But what if something happens to you? Nothing will happen. And if it does, call an emergency lock-picking service. But we're relatives. Relatives who steal have no right to keys. Rosalind sighed. I need to talk to Blaze. Go ahead. Are you sure you won't change your mind? I won't change my mind. Even if we stay outside? You won't stay on the street. The worst that could happen is we'd have to get a cheaper place to live. And if we don't have enough money even for that, Blaze will get a job. And if he doesn't, he will. How can you be so sure? Because the alternative is hunger, and hunger is a good motivator. After that conversation, 3 more days passed. Sunday night, they came again. This time by cab. Apparently, they decided that the conversation was going to be serious. and it wasn't worth saving money on transportation. Blaze looked depressed. A week without work had left him visibly gaunt, and there were bags under his eyes. He was dressed sloppily, in old jeans and a crumpled shirt. Rosalind didn't look good either, but she kept a more collected demeanor. "Hi, Daddy," she said as she entered the house. "Hi, how are you doing?" "Bad." We walked through to the living room. They sat down on the couch. I settled into my chair. "Well, tell me about it," I said. Blaze looked at his wife, then at me. "Erwin, we've come to tell you that we've agreed to your terms. All of them. Everything. And a public apology and the return of the keys?" "Yes." "Good. When?" Rosalind stepped in. "But there's one problem." "What's that?" "We don't know who to apologize to. To the people who know us all." But who exactly, I thought, really had to pick the right witnesses. McGregor knows the whole story. Clyde does too. Mrs. Palmer from the next street over has known our family for 20 years. And they all need to be apologized to? Yes. But that's humiliating. Yeah, I remember. Blaze stood up and paced the room. "Irvine, isn't there any other way?" "You can't." "Well, maybe a written apology?" "No." "Why not?" "Because letters can be written insincerely, and it's harder to lie to the eye." Rosalind took her husband's hand. "Blaze, we had a deal." "I know, but it's so hard. And it's even harder without a job." He sat back down. "Okay, when can this be arranged?" "Tomorrow. I'll call McGregor and Clyde, ask them to come over in the evening. Mrs. Palmer lives nearby. She'll come over herself." "What exactly do you need to say?" "The truth." "What truth?" "That you took my car without permission, that it was wrong, and that it won't happen again." "That's it?" "That's it." They looked at each other. "And then you'll help?" Rosalind asked. "Then we'll talk." "What do you mean, talk?" "I didn't promise immediate help. I promised to consider helping." Blaze jumped up. "So we'll apologize and you can say no?" "I can. But that's not fair." "Honest, I never promised automatic aid." "But you said they were conditions." "I said they were necessary conditions. Not sufficient." Rosalind turned pale. "Papa, you're deceiving us." "I'm not deceiving you. Just not making false promises." "But we thought—" "You thought wrong." Blaze started pacing the room again. "So we can apologize and it won't do any good?" "There will be a use." "What kind of good?" "Justice will be restored." "What's in it for us?" "Nothing for you. I get peace of conscience." "So you're doing this for yourself?" "Of course. Who else?" Rosalind stood up. "Dad, that's selfishness." "Yes, so what? But we're a family, aren't we?" "Family is when people take care of each other. You were only looking out for yourselves." "We cared about family." "Your family. You didn't care about me." "We did. We were talking about your safety. You were talking about your needs." Blaze stopped and looked at me. "Irvine, tell me honestly, is there any chance you could help?" "There is." "What kind?" "A small one." "How small?" "Very small." "But there is one." "There is." They looked at each other again. "I need to think," Blaze said. "Think. How much time do we have?" "As much as you want. But the longer we think, the worse our situation gets." "Yeah. So you're forcing us." "I'm not. Circumstances are forcing us." Rosalind sat back down on the couch. "Dad, what if we refuse your terms? You'll work things out on your own. And you?" "And I'll live in peace." "Quiet?" "Not at all." "Won't you feel sorry for us?" "I will." "But not enough to help?" "Not that much." Blaze sat down next to his wife. "So it's either humiliation or nothing?" "Yes." "And there's no third?" "No." They were silent for a long time. Then Rosalind stood up. "We have to go." "Go. And tomorrow we'll give you an answer." "Come on." They got ready to leave. At the door, Rosalind turned around. "Daddy, do you realize you could lose your daughter?" "I do." "And that doesn't stop you?" "It doesn't." "Why not?" "Because I've already lost my daughter. The day you stole the car." She didn't answer. They left and I was left alone. The next day they didn't call. They didn't call the day after that either. It wasn't until a week later that a short note came from Rosalind. Dad, we're leaving town. Blaze found a job in another state. We won't bother you anymore. I held the note in my hands for a long time, rereading it over and over. Then I folded it up and put it in my desk drawer. That same day, Clyde arrived with the car papers ready. We'd finalized the paperwork, and the pickup was now officially mine, fully and undisputedly. Congratulations, Clyde said, shaking my hand. It's really your car now. Thanks for your help. You're welcome. How are things going with the in-laws? Gone. All gone. I guess so. Pity, I thought. I don't know. Ask me in a year. Clyde shook his head. Tough times for family relationships. Yeah, but fair times. He left, and I was left alone on my property. The sun was setting behind the roofs of the neighbors' houses, painting the sky orange. It was quiet and peaceful. My pickup truck was parked in the driveway. Reliable, proven, truly mine. I started the engine and drove to the cemetery to see my wife. Told her everything that had happened. She would understand. She always did. On the way home, I thought about how life had gotten easier. No one will no longer encroach on my independence. No one will decide for me what I need and what I don't need. Maybe this is true freedom, the right to live by my own rules and be responsible for it. At home, I was greeted by Murphy the cat. He sat by the porch and purred, greeting his owner. At least someone in the world was glad I was back.